Hey, it's Becky, and today I'm going to be doing my June wrap up and my July TBR. If you want to skip straight to my TBR, please do use the link in the description, which has a timestamp. Or if you want to stay around to see what my wrap up for last month was, then stick around. So I've kind of got a confession to make. I'm filming this, I think, 2 days before the end of the month. And I've not quite finished one of these books I'm about to tell you, but I definitely do think I'm going to finish it in 2 days, as I've only got about 20% left. But once I finish that book, that means I've read all the books on my TBR for last month, and I'm quite happy with myself if I've done that, as I've also read, I think it's now 20 books for my first impressions videos, which is an hour for each book, so that's an additional 20 hours of reading on top of the 3 full books that I've read. So the first book that I've read, which probably won't be a surprise if you saw my reading vlog the other week, was Burn by Ness. I love this book. It's about dragons. It's got lots of different things. There's kind of a cult in it, there's some FBI stuff, there's like a mystery to unravel, and then there's lots of different characters that all have different reasonings for being in the book, and I really like how they ended up intertwining and to have a storyline together. I do think this is a book, and I'm going to say this over and over again, I do think this is a book that's probably best read going into it quite blind. I think if you know too much, then some of the twists maybe aren't as good. But yeah, the blurb basically just mentions Casimir, the dragon, Sarah, our main character, and discusses the FBI agents involved, as well as the prophecy that this book is kind of hinging on. Definitely read this if you haven't already, or get this on your TBR. The next book I read was Night of the Dragon. Actually, no, I think I read The Night of the Dragon before Burn. Night of the Dragon was another book that I read last month, which I really enjoyed as well. It was the final in a series that I loved. Overall, I love Julie Kagawa's books normally, but her Shadow of the Fox series as a whole is very Japanese inspired and uses a lot of myth and folklore to kind of narrate where the story is going. I don't want to say too much about the third book because it may give spoilers for the first and second book, but you should definitely go read the series as a whole if you haven't already. I would recommend anyone who likes fantasy and wants something a little bit different to go read this, as it's got a lot of Japanese inspiration and it's very different to kind of the common European centric fantasy book. And then the final book that I'm technically still reading is Feathertide by Beth Cartwright. This book is really fairy tale like in the way it's written. It's got a lot of magic in there in places that it wouldn't normally have magic. I don't really know how to describe this book properly, but it's got lots of little aspects, which a lot of the world building is very rooted in real world and it doesn't seem magic at the time, but our main character has feathers all over her body, and so she's trying to find her father and she has to go to a distant city in order to do that. And the city is normal for the most part, but it's full of magic and it's full of kind of wanderlust, and there's a lot of description in this book which feels fairy tale like and has the kind of writing style that makes you want to keep reading, and I'm just really enjoying it so far. I just started it really late in the month and I just need to finish it in the next 2 days. So I'm not going to take you through these 20 books I read an hour of, as they're all in my SPFBO videos, which I will link somewhere. And for my July TBR, actually one of the first books that I want to read is We've Ride the Storm by Devin, Madson. And that's one of the books I just read for the 2018 finalists at the SPFBO. And that's one of the books I've actually read like the first bit of. I want to finish that book completely because it just came out as a published book last week and I'm really excited to read more of it. It follows 3 very different point of views and lots of different things are happening, and there's a lot of kind of political tension, as there's the princess and the warrior who are kind of leaders but not quite leaders in some cases, and then we have the assassin who's a bit of an odd one out, but I'm really excited to see where her storyline goes. Another book I want to read is The Once and Future Witches by Alix Harrow. I haven't really heard much about this book other than the fact that lots of people are saying they've been enjoying it, and it's set in the late 1800s around the suffragette movement, I believe, and 3 sisters or 3 witches use their powers to kind of change the course of history. The next book I want to read is Seven Devils by Laura Lamb and Elizabeth May. I've read other books by Elizabeth May and I really loved them, except this book is going to be a lot more sci-fi from her anyway, and I'm really excited because it's sold as a feminist space opera and it follows 7 different characters, which I assume are going to be a great cast of characters. This book is very high sci-fi. It's got a resistance, there's space pilots, and this is where our story really starts with 2 pilots having to go on a space infiltration mission and discovering 3 people who know lots of secrets that can bring the Empire to its knees. I'm just really excited to see where it goes. There isn't a lot of information on the actual plotline beside that, but I'm excited. So that is 3 books that I really want to read next month. And then I also have a few other books I want to give myself a little bit of challenge this month. I've read my TBR most months so far. I've managed to read all the books on my TBR for the past couple of months, so I want to give myself a bit of a challenge next month to read a bit more. So I want to read Emissary by E.B. Brooks, which is a SPFBO finalist. I'll be reading the first impressions next week for anyway, and I'm hoping I enjoy it enough to keep reading it. And then I will also be reading The Assassin's Gift by Claire Boston. Again, this is a finalist that I'm going to be reading the first impressions of next week, and again I hope that I enjoy it enough that I'm going to read all of it next month as well. Both these books are fantasy. One of them is more dystopian, I think one of them is more high fantasy, but I'm really excited to get into both of them. But yeah, this wasn't a very long video as I've not been reading a lot, but I'm hopefully going to be reading more and more, and these videos are going to get a lot more interesting. Let me know if any of the books I'm reading next month are books that you've read before, and if you have any comments for me, or without spoilers of course, but please let me know what you thought, and thank you for watching. I hope to see you again soon.